Good morning, everybody. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Audit Committee, other members of the Council and officers in attendance at today's meeting. Welcome to members of the public and press who may be watching this live on YouTube. I am Councillor Alan O'Sullivan, Chairman of the Audit Committee. Please note that this meeting has been broadcast live and will be available for repeated viewings. Please could all in attendance follow the Council's ground rules for virtual meetings and attendance. In particular, to reduce feedback and background noise, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Only speak when invited to do so by me as Chairman. And please use the raise hand button in Microsoft Teams to indicate that you would like to speak. And remember to use the lower hand button once you have been called to speak. I'll be taking recommendations by consensus at this meeting, but if a vote is required on a particular item, I will call each committee member to vote in turn. In the event of a technical problem, there will be a short adjournment to establish if the fault can be addressed. If an individual loses connection and the meeting can continue with the quorum, it will do so. As I've previously mentioned, I am Councillor Alan O'Sullivan, Chairman of the Audit Committee. Can other members confirm their attendance? Councillor Alvey?
Present, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Brand?
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Kangarani?
Not here, Chairman.
Councillor Lane?
Yes, I'm here, Chairman. Can I just say that if I have got broadband issues, my camera will go off and I will endeavour to let you know. You'll work it out, but my camera I might turn it off because it gets a better signal.
I can hear you but not see you.
Yeah, exactly.
Councillor Levitt?
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Sevier? Not present either. Oh, yes, she is.
Yes.
You there, Councillor Sevier?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. My internet connection is very, very slow, and I've not really got anything on my screen. So if I disappear, it's not because I don't love you all. It's just I need to go through the process.
Right, we can see you. So
this is the problem with the forest. I'm very sorry, and I've had the same problem.
I see it's pretty poor. Councillor Ward.
Here. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you, members. If it's okay, I'll just ask officers to introduce themselves when their items arise. So shall we go for apologies first, Andy?
No apologies, Chairman.
No apologies. Okay. The minutes of the meetings will be brought forward to the next meeting for us to go through, and we'll go. Andy will bring those back to us, won't they? Item 2 is declaration of interest. Does any member have any interest they wish to declare on anything that's in this agenda today? No, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I do apologise. I do apologise,
Right.
but we're at the last. We were going to be looking at 2 sets of minutes for the 23rd of October and the 29th of January. Are they both in hold, sort of thing? Or?
Chairman, there's a bit of catching up to do, and we'll just
Okay,
get them out to members as soon as we can.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you please also remember to put hands up when you wish to speak? Item 4 is our first main agenda item today, and Anthony is here, I presume. Is Ant?
Good morning, Chairman.
Yes, you are. Morning, Chairman. You seem to have the floor for the next 3 items, so you look like you've got the past, present and future. So over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to introduce myself, Anthony Harvey from the Southern Internal Audit Partnership. Operates the Chief Internal Auditor for the authority. I'm also joined this morning by Liz Foster, who's magically appeared on screen. Liz is the day-to-day manager for New Forest, and for the first paper, Chairman, if it's okay with yourself, I'll hand straight over to Liz, who will introduce the paper and just run through some of the detail.
Lovely.
Excellent, thank you. And so if I
Good
take you
morning.
to your agenda pack, page 5 has got the covering report for our progress report. The progress in this report, as it says there, is up to the 10th of March. And if we go to page 7, which is where the progress report itself starts, a lot of this detail you'll have seen in previous reports. So I'll just scroll over those bits. On page 11, you'll see the dashboard on the top left there shows that at the time of the report on the 10th of March, we had 60% of the plan work completed, and the other 40% was work in progress. Obviously, this was a couple of weeks ago now, so we're currently at about 70%, and hopefully in the next week or so we'll be up nearer around 80% completion on that. Everything's getting towards the end of testing and reviews. So if we go down to page 12, we have got the update on the high priority actions that the committee asked us to include a couple of meetings ago. This just sets out where previously the high actions, where they've got to and why they're overdue. And then the table below sets out the actions that are outstanding. The lines in bold are the ones that all the actions have been cleared since the last time we reported to you. So there's quite a few of those lines there, which is really good to see. Then if we go down to page 15, we have got the rolling work programme, which sets out all the work we've got this year and where we are at with everything. As you'll see, the majority of the work is in field work. Quite a lot of it is in the review stage as well at the minute, so that's even obviously closer to being issued. And then if we go down to page 18, we've got the adjustments to the plan. So the vast majority of these you've seen before. The only new one to this report is right at the bottom there, regeneration and economic development. That one's just been deferred because the responsible officer is time's being taken up on COVID issues at the moment. We've also had a grant certification work that's been added in the past week or so, and that will be completed for the end of year next week. So that is the end of that report. If there's any questions on any of that, I'm happy to take those.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. First of all, my one is you've got assurances where you've got adequate and reasonable in the same report. Is that because adequate was the old system and reasonable is the new system, and you have to still retain both, or?
Yes, so on page 20, we've got the old definitions that we used to use, which included adequate. The new definitions have reasonable instead of adequate, and some of the definitions have changed slightly. So work that's in the 2021 year, so the current year, should be it would be reasonable rather than adequate. Any work that was in the previous year would say adequate. So at the minute we've got a mixture of both because some of the work is prior to this year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Levitt?
Oh, sorry,
Martin?
I can't hear you.
Martin?
Sorry,
yeah,
I was just saying I've got about 6 questions. So
No, you can't. Sorry.
No. Did you want Hilary, Brand and Alan to ask their questions? Because
yes, I would send those separately. If you have that many, I would let you pick the top 2.
Okay. Well, now I've got to consider now.
Shall we come back to you in a minute?
Yeah, yes, I think if you're going to give me 2, that's kind of frustrating, I have to say.
Well, yes. I mean, if you have a lot of questions, this is probably a good move to actually submit those before the meeting so that they can be pre-answered.
Yeah, but I want other people to hear the questions I'm asking.
Yes, then we could all have got the answers. Okay, I'll come back to you in a minute.
Yeah,
Councillor
please.
Alvin?
Sorry, Chairman, was that me you called?
Yes, you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I'll try and look. Well, I had a couple, but very quickly on the on page 18 or page 12 of the progress report at the bottom, it says environmental services defer the review in order to align the audit with the implementation of the new waste strategy. Well, I think we're all aware, or most of us will certainly be aware, that this is not going to be approved by spring, which is now. And I don't think we actually have a date for the approval of it. And I just wonder whether we can carry out, are we just not going to review the environmental services? I think perhaps that's my question.
So we've got it in the plan for next year. So obviously we'll keep that under review as to when's an appropriate time to review it. That's obviously down, that's a decision we discussed with Alan and the leaders in that area.
Yeah, if I could just comment as well, Councillor Alvey, we will find something within environment services as part of the audit plan for 21-22. So it's not that we wouldn't do anything if the delivery of the waste strategy is still delayed at that point.
Okay, thank you. Just very, very quickly, if I may, undergrounds, tree maintenance and open spaces, you say defer review. And then you end saying, however, on further assessment, these were found to be mid-review by the council. What does that mean?
We were doing the trees strategy, and it was too early for that. And so we were asked to look at developer obligations to open spaces. So what money is being given from the developer obligations towards open spaces and the maintenance of that. However, then when we went further down that line, it did turn out that the council was already looking at that themselves, so we didn't need to take that any further.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brand? You're on mute, Councillor.
Sorry, is it with me now?
Yeah, that's you. That's you, Hilary.
The conversation. My first one was around PCI DSS. That came into play about 10 years ago now, at least. This has been on this report for the last 2 years. I just wondered what is going on.
I think you broke up slightly, but I think I got the gist of got the gist of what you're asking there. Yeah, like you say, it's been a bit of a reoccurring item, this PCI. And I've asked my accountant, who's been looking at it for at least the last 6 months. She's going to be coming to the committee in the next meeting to do an update as to where she's got to, because we still have a single system. That means we are not going to be compliant. So we're currently working with ICT in terms of getting something in the work programme to address that last issue. But yeah, she's going to update the committee at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Is there any interim things that have been put in place, for example, where there is issues of PCI, being able to temporarily obfuscate the data and things like that?
It's the single issue we've got is that there's a slight manual process in one of the telephone systems that we use. So because the operator has to manually pause the recording, it's not compliant. Whereas obviously we've got every confidence that the operators are pausing the call, but because it's not an automated process, it's not compliant. So that's the only stick that we've got really in the ground that is causing us a problem at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, it mentions about programme and project management being reviewed, the framework being reviewed. I just wondered what framework you were using at the moment.
Well, we do tend to use
whether it was like a standard.
Yeah, we do tend to use Prince 2, but it's not necessarily the same for each project, and because obviously projects are different, whether it's a significant housing delivery project, whether it's an infrastructure project, whether it's an ICT project, So I think the idea with that framework is that it does just consider all of those things together, which is why, you know, it is subject to review. And yes, that's something that will be reviewed again this year.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Lastly, I just wanted to ask how the risk was determined on all of these, because it mentions in some cases things have been stopped and things have been started. So how is it determined which one is more important than the other?
Do you mean in which audits we put in the plans and which we don't? Yeah. That's discussion between ourselves and Alan and the EMT members concerned, what the risks are and how to sort of balance those off.
So is there like a risk and issue framework that you use in terms of impact?
What we do,
whether it's going to happen, could happen sooner or later.
Yeah, I can take that one, Liz.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So under the public sector standards, there's certain considerations that we have to take into account when we risk assess the entire sort of audit universe, as it's called. So there's a number of factors as a minimum that we take into account. So it could be legislative change, findings from previous audits, system changes, key person risk changes, any sort of process changes. So I think there's about 27 criteria that we take into account under about 7 broad headings that we consider when we risk assess the plan. So it's not a sort of formal 4x4 matrix, which is sort of what quite a lot of members are used to when looking at the risk registers. There's just a whole range of factors that we take into account when we risk assess the universe. And then what we do is continually reassess those risks to make sure that our audit work is aligned to having the maximum effect, so aligning it around sort of key changes. So it was mentioned about the sort of waste strategy, that where the existing sort of strategies coming to an end and the new ones coming in, it's what's going to be the appropriate time to do those reviews. And we continually relook at the audit plan for areas to come in or areas where it's just not the right time to look at those areas, but it is under constant review each time we meet with Alan and the management teams.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Right. My first question is page 17. We talk about LG income compensation scheme, certification work in progress. Can you please clarify what exactly that certification work is doing? Sorry.
That is the council's obviously received a grant for income compensating for income lost over COVID. They have to submit the grant to the government, the grant figures. We have to sign off to say that that money has been used appropriately. Right, okay. And that's done in different tranches, so it's a few through the year. And then following on, the business grant, sorry, page 18 of the report, Annex 1, business grants COVID. And it reads, to review the arrangements for awarding business grants to support local businesses through the pandemic. My question is, will this be repeated following the August 20 report? Because, you know, it has become evident in sort of news flashes and reports and what have you, that con merchants, if I can use that phrase, con merchants seem to have been encouraged, very much encouraged to make claims in this area. Yeah, and that's certainly something that we were looking out for when we did the review of this, to make sure that there are controls in place to pick up any potential fraud. And there's a lot of information coming out in the sector of names, bank accounts and things to look out for as well. So that is part of that. And we will, if there's any further grants, then obviously we look at that again. But we're happy with the work we did previously. But as far as residents are concerned, we will be cracking down on con merchants who make these vacuous appeals for grants and what have you. Yes, I mean, there's certainly controls in place for that. I don't know if Alan's got more information, but we found that there were controls in place.
Yeah, that I can only reiterate, as you say, the controls are in place. We're getting constant updates from the National Fraud Office. Any sort of suspect activity, we are straight on it. We're checking our records.
Yeah.
And yeah, if we do find that any grants have been paid fraudulently, then we will take appropriate action.
Okay, well, I'm just glad if any journalist is watching this meeting to hear that very assertive and ideal response. And just on page 19, we talk about risk management member training. Are those councillors who'll be having training there? Is that I presume that means that?
Alan, do you know the answer?
Yeah, well, that was we did a risk management session before the last audit committee.
Okay, so that is member training, yeah. Okay, council member training. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, so everyone happy to note that report? Are you continuing to the next one, Liz? You're doing the internal audit charter?
I think Anthony's taking over from here. Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you, Chairman. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 5. This is one of the 2 reports from ourselves that you're formally required to approve each year. So the first one is the Internal Audit Charter. So it's a requirement under the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards that we have an Internal Audit Charter that we formally review each year, agree it with the management team, and then bring it to yourselves for formal approval. Essentially, the Charter outlines our roles, our purpose, our authority within the organisation. It provides us or enshrines that we have sufficient resources in order to complete our internal audit work. And if we feel that we're not given sufficient resources, it gives the escalation routes to resolve those. It outlines the reporting lines, our independence, unfettered access to records and how we'll treat those records accordingly. And it also gives the flavour of our role, the role of the executive team, and also your role as a committee, and the sort of reports that you can expect from ourselves throughout the year. Now, as you may recall, we were formally externally assessed by the Institute of Internal Auditors last year. Part of their assessment is to look at the charters to make sure they're fully compliant with all of the standards. And you may recall we passed every element of the external assessment without any points to sort of note where we were non-compliant. So the charters are fully compliant with everything that it needs to be. So hopefully it's sort of stood the test of time for the last few years, and it'll be appropriate for the forthcoming year as well. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, I think this is a fairly standard form.
It is, yeah.
Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question on paragraph 4.2, page 21. The council employs a corporate fraud officer. How long have we employed a full-time corporate fraud officer? But the thing I really want to talk about is I was recently watched a CIPFA webinar on fraud operations in councils, district councils, and learned in Hertfordshire they have 5 district councils that basically have merged their whole fraud operations. I'm just wondering, is anything like that happening in Hampshire, or does CIPFA, the Southern Internal Audit Partnership, do they link other councils to get the best out of them?
Okay, well, we have different arrangements with each of our partners depending upon what their own internal audit what their own arrangements are with regards to counter fraud work. So for New Forest District Council, where they have their own internal fraud officer, then we don't deliver any fraud sort of services directly to the council unless there's a requirement should you need us to sort of do that. So really sort of any further on that, it's probably best if Alan takes any sort of further questions that you have about your own internal audit arrangements. But it's to give you that assurance that should the need arise and you do need to call upon those particular sort of services from ourselves, then we do have a number of sort of certified and accredited counter fraud specialists. But the work that we do as a partnerships generally primarily focused on the 2 county councils that we provide those services to, and the sort of districts and boroughs tend to have their own internal audit arrangements.
Thank you, Anthony. Alan, what's any thoughts on?
I don't necessarily feel I need to add any more. I mean, just to confirm that our corporate fraud officer she's not a full-time officer. But she's been with the council an awful long time. She knows what she's doing. She knows what her focus is. And as Ant says, Southern Internal Audit Partnership are there. They do include a review of our proactive fraud work as part of the audit plan. So, they do review the work of our fraud officer, even if they don't actually carry out our fraud work itself. So there is adequate coverage.
But if the fraud officer is not full time, isn't that something we should be reviewing? I'm only basing my opinion on the SIPFA webinar. I thought it was enormously interesting and informative.
I think, but to be fair, I think we constantly review our resource. I think if we felt we needed more resource, we'd put more resource in. At this point in time, we're quite happy with the output we get from our corporate fraud officer, with the support that we also get when required from Anthony and his team at the audit partnership.
But it just seemed to be a real massive increasing problem with district councils across the country. So, okay, I'll call my door and.
I think if the officers felt that was the case, that fraud was a major thing, then they would obviously increase the amount of hours available for a fraud officer to work. Okay, thank you, Martin. Nobody else has any questions on that. So the recommendation is it's recommended the Audit Committee approve the Internal Audit Charter 21-22 as attached in Appendix A. Everyone agree with that one? Grand, thank you. Right, we move on to the audit plan for 21-22.
Thank you, Chairman. So this gives, the internal audit plan, which again you're formally required to approve for the forthcoming financial year. And we've also given an indicative plan for the following 2 years as well. Now, if you turn to agenda pages 39 to 40, what this sort of gives you a flavour of is the various sort of sources of information that we take into account when we're developing the plan. So as we mentioned previously, we'll take into account corporate strategies, corporate risk registers, our view of sort of new and emerging risks. We discuss with the management teams about any potential changes in their area, because from an audit perspective, obviously it's change can be inherently sort of risky, so we always factor those areas into account when we develop the plan. Also, we take into account the outcomes of our previous work, and also the work of any other assurance providers, including external audits as well. So we take all of those factors into account when we risk assess the sort of audit universe to come up with those areas where we feel that coverage is needed for the forthcoming year. So if I can ask you to turn to page 41, I won't talk through the plan line by line, although obviously happy to take any questions. But if I just explain the headings, so the left-hand column, which is titled Audit, just gives the generic title of the audit area that we'll be looking at. The next column gives an indicative scope of what we can potentially cover within that audit area, and it's almost sort of like a bit of a justification for why it's in the plan as well. If there's going to be a particular focus for 21-22, for example, those areas where we look at it each year, but we might take a different theme, then we've included that for you as well. So there's an example on page 41 with financial stability, that the focus next year is going to be on in-year budget monitoring and budget management. We've also indicated how it links to the corporate priorities to make sure, again, we're focusing on those areas that have the greatest significance to the council. We've given indication of when the areas were last audited. Now, if there's a dash in the column, it doesn't mean that that area's potentially never been audited. What it means is we only look back over the previous 3 years, because from an audit perspective, if you haven't looked at it in the last 3 years, then it's almost sort of a bit irrelevant of when it was last looked at. And then the final 3 columns just gives an indication of when we're proposing to look at those areas. So we don't aim to look at every area every year, because it would be excessive. It wouldn't be risk based in line with the standards, and it would also be sort of cost prohibitive for the council for us to look at every single aspect of every operation every year. Really, the sort of main comments and things for yourselves is to sort of see if you feel that the coverage is appropriate, and if there are any areas that you feel should be included within the audit plan for next year, then we're happy to sort of take that on board and consider it and discuss it with the management team. The last thing really to sort of say about the plan is they are fluid. So if there's any sort of changes that's happening, so for example, a lot of our focus for 2021 has been sort of COVID related, then if there's any sort of requirements to be certifying the ongoing government grants that are coming out, then we've got those provisions in the plan, and we can just adjust it accordingly if some areas need to come in or need to sort of just be deferred until future years. So I'll pause there, Chairman.
Thank you. I presume your hand is up, Councillor Levitt.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So off you go.
Just a quick, Anthony. Just page 9 of your report, page 43 to us. I'm just thinking, universal credits. I think this is. I didn't see this in the previous report I compared this to. Completely new subject. But why is nothing under the corporate priority, or is that just a typing glitch sort of thing?
Yep, absolutely. Sorry, that is just an omission. Well spotted. So that'd be corporate priority 5, and potentially linking to 3 as well, same way as with housing benefit.
No. Thank you, Anthony. That's very kind.
Well spotted.
No.
Sorry. Councillor Alvin.
Yeah, a couple. Just before that, Anthony, you've got NNDR. I'm sorry, I can't remember what NNDR is. Can you quickly tell me?
I can. It's national non-domestic rates. So it's effectively
Right.
business rates collection.
Thank you. And the next one is on the next page, top income collection and banking. You say last audited 2021, and you don't intend to do it again till 23-24. Is that reasonable to leave it for 3 years before looking at it again?
We will keep all of these areas under assessment, but we tend to look at the financial system reviews on a sort of 3-year rolling basis, unless there's any particular changes or is the result of our previous year's work, if it highlights any particular issues where we do need to look at it more frequently. What we have also included, which is on agenda page 44, so it's a couple of lines under the income collection and banking, is where the financial system changed at the start of 2021. As a result of that work, there might be sort of a few things coming out of our audit work this year just because the systems are new and becoming embedded. So if there are any issues for us to formally follow up, then we've included a provision in there for 2021 to formally follow up if there are any issues that are coming out of our financial system work this year. So hopefully we can always sort of pick things up there should there be a need, but on the assumption that previous good controls will continue, then we don't feel that these areas need to be looked at any more frequently than on over a sort of 3-year rolling cycle.
Okay, thank you. And one last one, which comes back to an earlier question, under environmental services, fleet management on page 13 of your report, you've got that down as 21-22, and I'm very conscious that this is still up in the air, and I don't know that you're going to be able to achieve that. Don't know whether Alan would want to comment on that.
Yeah, again, it might be that it just takes a slightly different shape. You know, if we're not quite there yet in terms of the new waste strategy for this council, then, you know, there'll be something in and around refuse collection, recycling, street cleansing in any case.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brand.
Yeah, my question was just around network and communication. So you said earlier if there was a hyphen in there that it meant it hadn't been reviewed for 3 years. That would mean that this one won't be reviewed for 5 years. As technology moves on really quickly, is that wise, or is it covered by some other type of audit or review?
No, I think with the IT plan in particular, we will constantly re-risk assess that to make sure all of our work is aligned to when we feel that needs to be done. So if there's any area of change potentially with the IT plans, there will be the ability to bring reviews forward if we need to. We have agreed what we feel is going to be the appropriate focuses for next year. So certainly with the IT disaster recovery and business continuity, there's a lot of changes going on in the council. Some of those changes should be in place for the end of March. So it will then give the council the opportunity to look at those arrangements, to test the new arrangements, and then we can come in afterwards and sort of look at those things. But we will keep all of the different areas under review, regular contact with Rob Beer and the IT team just to make sure our coverage is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Overall, for all your internal audits, are you doing physically coming into the NFDC, or are you managing to do most of this remotely, or how are you managing in this last year?
For the last year, obviously not through choice, but for enforced, all of our work has, with a couple of slight exceptions, has all been done remotely. Fortunately, with the technology that we now have available to us, that certainly if we went back 5 years, we would have been in a very, very different position. But for example, with Teams, you can share your desktop. So it's effectively as if you're looking over someone's shoulder. So if there's something that can't be demonstrated through documentation and all of those things that, again, the technology now means it's really easy to sort of share things securely via Office 365 and SharePoint. But if things can't be sort of demonstrated through documentation, and it was almost as if you needed to interrogate the systems. The officers can share screens and you can take screenshots and all of these things. So it's really no different than actually being in person. Certainly looking forward then, and again, there is a provision within the plan for it next year, depending upon how the council may look at its operating models going forward and perhaps embracing some of the benefits of the sort of virtual working world, then we will align all of our audit coverage accordingly. There have been, but it's not necessarily particular to New Forest District Council, but where we've got a number of partners, there are some certain niche reviews or certain areas that we just can't do remotely. So some of the schools work that we do, a lot of the records are paper based. So we've just needed to cover those things or do different reviews this year. So as and when the world reopens back up, we can sort of focus on some of those areas. There may be aspects, for example, with like your data center sort of physical security that we can't do virtually, but hopefully as restrictions start to be removed, we can again have a mixture of approach of those sort of physical site visits. But to be honest, it's worked remarkably well, and with not needing to travel, with the availability of offices, has actually made life quite easier in certain aspects. But given us different challenges in a couple of other areas as well. But it's worked remarkably well, and I think there'll be a lot of these areas that will be sort of keeping with us going forwards. If it can make us more efficient, and it can either mean we can give you more coverage or sort of contain the costs a little bit more.
Yeah, I find I can go to more meetings than I necessarily want to go to, but yeah, like yesterday, there was 3 or 4 meetings which I could never have done if I had to physically be at all of them. I've got a meeting on Tuesday where I got 2 meetings at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly as well for ourselves, where we have partners in Hampshire, West Sussex, and up in Surrey. The reduction in travel time, especially for sort of committee meetings and stuff, is just remarkable from ourselves. That you're not. My car thinks I've upset it because it's literally sat my drive for a year without sort of hardly moving at all. I think I've put 3 tanks of petrol in it in a year. So that goes from sort of a tank a week down to virtually sort of just not using it at all. So in terms of travel costs, either direct costs or travel time, and also sort of reducing the carbon footprint, it's been really good for ourselves from that aspect anyway.
That'll help reduce our fees.
Well, funnily enough, we should increase our fees each year in line with the National Pay Awards. So the 2.75% pay award that was finally agreed back in October, we didn't pass that on because we were able to offset it just because we're not travelling. So we were able to sort of offset that for you for this year. So obviously it's reduced the cost of the council as well.
Well done, Anthony.
Thank you.
Okay. So I don't think there's any further questions on this. So it's recommended the Audit Committee approve the Internal Audit Plan 21-22 attached as Appendix A. And everybody happy with that? Lovely. Thank you then very much, Anthony and Liz, for your presentations this morning. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chairman. You too. Thank you, members.
Right, we now move on to item 7, which is the Audit Financial Report and External Audit Cycle. And that's over to Alan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a verbal update from me because some dates have changed again this year. Now, typically, publication date for the draft set of accounts has always been the 1st of June, which is why historically this committee has always met on the last Friday of May to approve the draft set of accounts. Now, I say typically because this was obviously pushed back in 2020 in terms of the 1920 accounts, with the primary reason at that point being obviously the enforced remote working conditions that we were put into at that point. And it's fair to say not every authority was quite as ready as we were in order to actually just carry on working remotely and as effectively as we could. So in terms of the new 2021 regulations, they take on board a recommendation from Sir Tony Redmond, having carried out his review on local government audit. And essentially, they've pushed the draft publication date back now to the 1st of August. So that's now a 2-month extension. Now, we didn't use the full extension available to us for 1920. And EY have already arranged their resource to conduct their NFDC audit commencing from the 5th of July. So the team and I will need to finish before the 1st of August. Now, it's going to be helpful for us again to use some of the additional time because there are complexities again in the 2021 accounts. We don't know, for example, how we are supposed to deal with the £60 million worth of business grants that have come through us yet. So we're still awaiting, obviously, updates and information from SIPFA, for example. So the dates I'd like to work to in terms of preparing the draft set of accounts would be conducive to an audit committee meeting on the 2nd of July. So just to be absolutely clear, the 28th of May would come out of the schedule for this committee, and that would be replaced with a meeting on the 2nd of July. And that would apply to this year and next. In terms of the audited publication date, again, this is obviously moved as well. So that's no longer the 31st of July. The audited publication date is now the 30th of September. The second meeting then to move and consider, so we've got one at the moment scheduled for the 30th of July. Having consulted with EY on their timetable they intend to use for us, we can be earlier than the 30th of September, which, to be fair, if we get there, would be a really good result. Because even this week there was a report announced from the National Audit Office, which confirmed that only 45% of councils actually met the revised publication deadlines for 1920. So yeah, if we can work to the earlier than 30th September, we'll be in a pretty good position. The suggested meeting date then, so to take out the 30th of July, we'd like to put in a meeting on the 10th of September. Now, there is a clash with GPNL that day, so that would be rather unusually. It would have to be a 2 p.m. start for Audit Committee on the 10th of September. Chairman, I think Andy's going to just mention those dates again when we come to the next agenda item, item 8. But obviously, what I wanted to do in this item is just to give that little bit of broader context, and obviously just initially put those dates out there. That was all I was going to say, Chairman.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, and pat on the back for getting our audit accounts in on time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there would have been a lot of work to get that to that point. In the background, bit of duck paddling.
Yeah, there certainly was. Yeah, I shall pass the message on to the team. Thanks.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, so if we move on to the work plan then, and I presume we'll agree these new dates. So the 28th of May then in the work plan will change to the 2nd of July, and that will still be a 9:30 start.
That's right, Chairman.
And the, sorry, somebody coming in. John, yes?
Yeah, only just to record, sorry. Yeah, only just to record that I will not be able to attend the 2nd of July. I'm hoping at that stage I'll be down in Cornwall somewhere. So, but I'll give my formal apologies when the notices are issued. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Yes,
I'll get Andy to record that.
okay, I'll take a note of that. So just to recap then, the meeting
Can you
down.
John? Can you mute yourself, John? That's up top. Okay, Andy.
So the main meeting is being moved to the 2nd of July at 9:30, and the 30th of July meeting is being moved to the 10th of September in the afternoon. And we'll arrange that. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely. And I presume, John, you need to put your hand down. And has anybody else got anything else to say on the work plan? I think everything else is fairly straightforward on there. Everybody happy? Good. In which case, I've got nothing else to add to that. So I've got no further business. So I would just like to say thank you very much for your attendance this morning, and for a fairly brief meeting for the Audit Committee this year. And we'll see you at the next meeting, which is, when is the next meeting, Andy? Do you know? The 2nd of July. Isn't it?
2nd of July. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.